The moment he turned the key in the front door, the silence hit him like a freight train. The soft hum of the street outside had been replaced by an almost surreal stillness, broken only by the faint scraping of something being moved. David had come home exhausted, his body aching from a 12-hour shift at the factory, yet there was a weight heavier than fatigue pressing on his chest. He had spent the last few months barely keeping his small apartment clean, juggling the endless demands of being a single father to 7-year-old Lily, while trying to stay afloat financially. Bills were piling up, the laundry was never ending, and the dishes seemed to multiply overnight. Today, like every other day, he had resigned himself to walking into chaos, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. In the middle of his cramped living room, wearing a pair of rubber gloves and bending over a bucket of soapy water, was none other than Evelyn Hartman, the CEO of Hartman Industries, the very woman whose company had nearly broken him months ago when he'd applied for a managerial position and been rejected outright. Her sharp, commanding presence, which he had only ever seen in glassy boardrooms and glossy magazine spreads, was now oddly softened by the domestic act of scrubbing his kitchen floor. The image was so incongruous, so surreal, that for a moment David froze, unable to move or speak. His tired eyes scanned the room, dust-coated shelves gleaming under the afternoon sun, crumpled laundry neatly folded on the sofa, and the faint aroma of a homemade soup simmering on the stove. Every corner of the apartment bore the unmistakable imprint of care, attention, and painstaking effort. David's mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? Had one of Lily's teachers sent a volunteer? But no, this was Evelyn Hartman. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, an unbidden mix of awe, confusion, and suspicion twisting inside him. He took a cautious step forward, the wooden floor creaking under his weight, and she looked up, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him want to avert his gaze. But there was no malice there, no judgment, only an earnest vulnerability that seemed almost human, almost tender, in the woman he had always associated with power and ruthlessness. Before he could utter a word, he heard the faint giggle of Lily, who had been playing with her dolls in the corner, unnoticed. She had seen Evelyn first, and without hesitation, she ran across the room, her small feet pattering like rain on the wooden floor. Evelyn bent down, arms outstretched, and Lily clung to her without fear. In that moment, the distance between the high-powered CEO and the small, struggling single dad seemed to collapse entirely. It was as if the invisible walls of status, expectation, and pride had been dissolved by something as simple and as profound as an act of kindness. If you believe in the transformative power of kindness and second chances, please hit like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. David finally found his voice, but it was no more than a strained whisper. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" She straightened, wiping her hands on a towel, and gave him a small, serene smile. There was a long pause before she spoke, a pause heavy with meaning. "I came because I needed to," she said softly, "and because I could." Her words were cryptic, but there was no condescension, no lecture, only a quiet acknowledgement of the chaos that had defined his life for far too long. David's mind reeled. How could someone like Evelyn, someone whose very name carried weight and influence, step into his humble world without expectation or judgment? Memories of the past months flashed through his mind, the endless nights balancing work and parenting, the worry etched into his face when he couldn't pay a bill on time, the gnawing sense of failure that lingered like a shadow no matter what he did. And now, standing in front of him, was someone who had the power to crush him professionally, but had instead chosen to lift the burdens he carried silently. Evelyn moved around the apartment with quiet efficiency, straightening the living room, wiping down the counters, and even folding a mountain of laundry with an almost hypnotic precision. She hummed softly to herself, a gentle melody that seemed to fill the apartment with warmth and calm. David watched, speechless, as the woman he had once feared and resented transformed the very space that had been a reflection of his struggles into something almost magical. The truth, when it came, hit him like a tidal wave. Evelyn had not come to mock him, not to belittle him, but because she had seen something in him that the world often overlooked: resilience. She had discovered, through a mutual acquaintance at the company, that David had been raising Lily alone for years, sacrificing his own comfort and ambition to give her a life filled with love and stability. And instead of keeping this knowledge to herself, she had decided to act, to offer help in a way that didn't scream charity but spoke directly to the dignity of a man who had spent years doing everything right despite impossible odds. David felt a lump in his throat, his eyes stinging with the first tears in months. He had never experienced this kind of kindness, so personal, so deliberate, and yet so completely unassuming. It wasn't just the cleaning, the food, or the organization. It was the acknowledgement of his struggle, the unspoken understanding that he was not invisible, that someone of incredible power and privilege had chosen to meet him at his level and lift him up, not for recognition, not for a show, but simply because it was the right thing to do. As the evening sun dipped lower, casting long golden rays through the apartment windows, David and Evelyn moved around the space together, a strange, unspoken rhythm developing between them. She didn't lecture him about missed opportunities or the chaos of his life. She simply helped, and in doing so, reminded him of a truth he had nearly forgotten, that even in the darkest, most isolating moments, humanity had a way of reaching through, connecting, and healing. Lily, meanwhile, had taken to sitting on Evelyn's lap, chatting animatedly about school and her dreams of being a scientist. Evelyn listened, truly listened, asking thoughtful questions and laughing at the little girl's imaginative stories. David watched this, a swelling sense of gratitude mixing with astonishment. His daughter had been lonely in many ways, missing the presence of supportive adults in her daily life, and now she had found someone who, without any obligation, had chosen to be present, kind, and caring. Dinner followed, simple but comforting. A vegetable stew simmered slowly on the stove, with warm bread straight from the oven. Evelyn had prepared it herself, using ingredients she had brought in her car, a quiet attention to detail that mirrored the care she had shown throughout the day. They sat together at the small dining table, the three of them sharing a meal that felt almost sacred in its simplicity. No mention was made of business, of past grievances, of the social chasms that normally divided them. It was just food, just warmth, and just the acknowledgement that they were human beings first, capable of empathy and connection. David could feel the weight of months of stress lifting from his shoulders, replaced by a strange combination of awe, relief, and humility. He had always considered himself a hard worker, a man who did his best for his daughter, but he had never expected recognition from someone like Evelyn. Her presence, her actions, had reminded him that sometimes life's greatest lessons came from unexpected places, and that even the most ordinary acts of kindness could carry extraordinary power. As the night wore on, Evelyn helped David tuck Lily into bed, reading her a story and ensuring she was cozy beneath her blankets. When she finally rose to leave, David felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name: gratitude, sadness, wonder. He wanted to thank her, to express the depth of his appreciation, but words seemed wholly inadequate. Evelyn merely smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and said simply, "I'll see you tomorrow." For a long moment, David stood in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, watching her sleep, the weight of the day pressing against him in a way that was almost overwhelming. And yet, beneath that weight, there was a spark, a fragile, glowing ember of hope. For the first time in a long while, he realized that he was not alone, that someone had seen his struggle and responded not with pity, but with genuine humanity. The next morning, as sunlight streamed into the apartment, David found himself humming softly while tidying up, the rhythm of the day no longer a struggle but a kind of meditation. He thought of Evelyn, of her quiet courage, and of the invisible lessons she had imparted, not through lectures or grand gestures, but through the simple, radical act of showing up. And in that act, he found inspiration to face each new challenge with renewed determination. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn continued to appear, sometimes in unexpected ways: a note on the kitchen counter, a loaf of bread left in the hallway, an extra bag of groceries. Each gesture was small, almost imperceptible to an outsider, yet monumental to David. They reminded him that life was not solely about the battles we fought in isolation, but about the quiet, steady acts of love and care that connected us to one another. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, David returned home to find the apartment bathed in warm light, Lily giggling over a puzzle she was working on, and Evelyn arranging flowers on the dining table. He felt the familiar swell in his chest, the kind that brought tears to his eyes. This time, he did not hesitate. He crossed the room, placing a hand on her shoulder, and whispered a heartfelt thank you that seemed almost too small for the enormity of what she had done. Evelyn's response was simple, almost understated, yet it carried a depth that struck him to his core. "You've done all the hard work, David. I just helped you see it." As the weeks passed, David noticed a change in himself. He approached life with a newfound patience and courage, inspired by Evelyn's unwavering commitment to kindness. He began to see opportunities where he had only seen obstacles, to recognize moments of beauty in the mundane, and to embrace the love and support that had quietly entered his life. And in that quiet transformation, he understood the profound truth that sometimes the greatest gifts we receive are not money, accolades, or promotions, but the unwavering faith of another human being who believes in us when we can no longer believe in ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share this video to honor the power of unexpected kindness. And if you feel moved, comment below to let us know how small acts of love have changed your life. It might inspire someone today. David would never forget that evening when he first walked through the door to find Evelyn cleaning his house. The tears he had shed were not only for the physical exhaustion and struggle of his life, but for the overwhelming realization that sometimes miracles arrive not in the form of grand gestures, but in the quiet, persistent presence of someone who chooses to care. In Evelyn, he had found that miracle. In himself, he had discovered the courage to keep going, to rise above despair, and to embrace the simple truth that kindness, when offered without expectation, had the power to heal, to transform, and to restore hope in ways that nothing else could. And as he tucked Lily into bed that night, brushing back her hair with tender fingers, he felt an immense gratitude, not just for Evelyn, but for the lesson she had brought into their lives, that humanity at its best was not about power, wealth, or status, but about the unshakable commitment to lift others up, even when it is inconvenient, unseen, or unexpected. It was a lesson David would carry forever, one that would shape not only his life, but the life of the little girl he loved more than anything in the world. Word count, approximately 1,810 words. Engagement requests included at strategic points. Story complete in one part, cinematic, emotional, and inspirational. If you want, I can also craft a short, SEO-optimized YouTube description with keywords and hashtags specifically for this story that will boost reach and engagement. It would fit perfectly under this video. Do you want me to do that next?